Hello, and welcome everyone to our first recording ever. And my first guest, my very special guest making history, is Louis from Rialto. So where
Right.
have you been for 24 years? I'm sure everyone asks you that. They've come back,
It
everybody.
went very quickly. No, I've been doing all sorts of things. Probably I did a couple of after Rialto, I did a couple of solo records. But really my most exciting musical sort of pursuit, I suppose, in the last 15 years has been playing guitar for Grace Jones. And I've been in her band doing that, like all of her shows since 2011. And
Wow.
so um, and I've playing with various other people, Danny Goffey from Supergrass, and writing some songs, um, and I was also doing other things, working on a festival and things like that. So but yeah, as time goes it just accelerates the older you get, doesn't it? I mean, it's suddenly like years go by, and it's you're in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was looking at your CV actually online, obviously for the you've done a lot, haven't you? Modeling, is it all that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's true. I did some TV commercials and stuff.
Yes.
Thankfully, most of them weren't shown here, but I did. I mean, it was, I think after Rialto and I had small kids as well. I was sort of like, and a drummer friend of mine was like, "You should be going for these things." I went for a few, and I was like, "This is not for me at all." And he was like, "No, no, stick with it. I just got a really good one. I don't have to work for the next year. I can just do music." And I landed a really good commercial for. I mean, I used to be really squeamish about doing stuff like that, and I remember, you know, years ago, like the idea of syncing some of your music to, we even, when I was in my previous band, Kinky Machine, we were offered, they just wanted to use a bit of instrumental music for a Guardian advert, and even that we were like, oh, I don't know, like, is that cool enough? Is that all right? Then the older you get, you're like, well, yeah, we're gonna have to definitely take these things. I jump at them now. And the commercials thing, yeah, was a bit like that. I kind of needed some other things to do, and I landed a UPS commercial,
Yes, I saw. Yeah.
and ended up doing the music for it as well. So it was a
Oh,
really, I think that era of this was this is going back quite some time, and I think the somehow I managed to persuade them that Johnny and I from Rialto, Johnny, should do music. And it was really because we got to chat with or I got to chat because I was on the commercial. I got to chat with the art director a lot and hear what he wanted and talk to him about what he really wanted. So I had the brief when all the other people who were pitching for it had a sort of paragraph. I really knew what he wanted, and so that was quite a lucky break. And I followed you know, some other commercials after that. Yeah.
wow. There you go. Anyway, that's quite an interesting tangent. But so you're back at the Scala. That's your big comeback gig, yeah?
It is, yeah. I mean, the first gig we did after this long time away was we played at Shine Festival, and we'd been being asked for a few years, and then we just thought we'd do that. We've done a few little shows since, but yeah, the Scala is our London headline date.
And it's
May.
the 14th of May. Got here. All right. Get the plug in. Good. Yeah, it's very exciting. I mean, I was a big fan back in the day. So, when I saw, I think I saw you at the LA 2.
Right.
Sadly, buried under much rubble. But yeah, so that was very exciting. And yeah, obviously we do a fair bit with the Scala. So when I saw that, I thought I have to come to that one.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
you've got Desperate Journalist as support as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great band.
yeah,
Great.
yeah, yeah. Close personal friends of the Gloom. So a bit of a crossover there. Yeah, known them for many years. But, you've got two singles out. Is that right at the moment? You've had two releases. Is that right?
It's actually three.
Is
We've
it
had
three
three.
now?
Yeah, three now.
Not up
We had
to.
no one leaves this discotheque alive.
Yeah.
And then Car That Never Comes,
Yeah.
And about 10 days ago, I think it was, maybe 2 weeks, we released a song called "Remembering to Forget," and the next one is called "Neon and Ghost Signs," and that's also the name of the album.
I've got that one. That's coming out the end of April, isn't it? This month, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, the single's actually coming out on the I think it's coming out on the 14th of April, and the album's coming out on the 24th, I think.
Made a
So
note of that.
they have the same name,
Yeah.
but obviously it's the single appears on the album. It's the title track.
Yes. Yeah. I got that note anyway. So, yeah, no one leaves this discotheque alive. It's quite interesting. It's one of my foibles. But what is it that indie bands have against discotheques? Because there's often a song about burning it down or this sort of thing. Having made a lot of money from discos, I don't
I,
take it personally. But it's quite an
I'm
interesting
not.
thing.
No, I don't have anything against them. I don't. I mean, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose there's a few different things going on in that song, meaning wise. And allow me to be very pretentious. It's a sort of, in a way, it's a kind of metaphor. Am I really going to say this? A metaphor? Sorry, a metaphor for life. Couldn't even get it out. So, but I wanted the sort of feeling of like, part of it is about just like you got to grab it now. Like you got to have, um, um, because it's before you know it, you're not here. Um, but then there's also an element of sort of doomy desperation in the lyric as well, which probably, also reflects on me at my age, being the last man standing in a club full of people who are younger than me, or something like that. It's kind of
Yeah.
imagining obviously that scenario. Um, well, I don't have anything against discos at all, and if I did, I probably wouldn't be playing with Grace Jones.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very disco-y track.
Yeah,
I very much liked it. I mean, it's a banger. You know,
thank you.
it's yeah, definitely. On those ones where on first listening, I was like, yeah, this is great, absolutely
Yeah,
fantastic. So yeah,
cool.
I've really enjoyed everything I've heard so far. So I'm very excited about the album. Um,
Great. No, well, it's yeah, I like it. It's been getting great reviews as well, actually. So yeah, no, I'm pleased, and I think I didn't want to, and nobody else probably would have put the record out if we'd come back with something, half baked. I think it had to be a decent record. It had to be a good record, really. I think to warrant coming back and not, um, yeah, I don't know. I just felt like I want to do. I want anything that people liked about the band originally, you know, I wanted to have that, but I wanted to have a lot of other elements and a lot of other things that were going to kind of um, excite people, hopefully.
yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it's really great. I mean, sometimes bands do come back and you kind of go, yeah, but this one's got me very excited. I'll be honest.
It,
So very
it's,
pleased. It's great.
I think I think one of the things about like coming back after a long time, and it's not like I ever stopped writing songs. I think I've got better at writing songs, and I've got better at producing, and I've got better at playing. All of those things. I think that I think there was a turning point for me, like when I was demoing over the years, and wondering where these things were going to end up, and I think there's something about sort of coming to terms with the person you are now when you make the record, not trying to. And for me, part of that was like lowering my range, my singing range. It was like just don't be trying to reach up and pitch everything in a key that I might have tried sang in, might have sang in when I was sung in when I was 25 or 26 or whatever. Um, I think it's important, yeah, for bands coming back that they just whatever way it is. I think it's like be real about who you are now and try and sort of not chase that person that you were when people knew you last time.
Yeah, yeah, no, it sounds sensible. And it's quite interesting that some bands that are sort of coming back now from that era are actually kind of bigger than when they were back in the day. And the thing is, people like Shed Seven, selling out Brixton, which didn't do back, and likewise having number one albums. You know,
Um,
so you're hoping a bit of that glitter might rub off.
what's been amazing is that the the few gigs we've done, we had people singing lyrics back to us that they never sang those songs back to us years ago. And obviously they've lived with them and they've meant, it's meant something to them, and maybe they've listened to it a few times here and there and whatever. But it's a really it's a really joyous thing to be on the end of that. It's like, wow, God, that's really amazing. It feels really um it was just a lovely feeling, to have these people singing stuff back. And I think that I think that's what happens over time. And I also think, I think for bands, new bands now, there's so much out there and there's so much brilliant stuff out there that it's quite difficult to break through the noise. And I think that actually in some ways there's an advantage for a band like Shed Seven having a past, and for a band like Rialto, it's something we can tap into, but sort of build on. Um, I also feel, I don't know what your listeners and followers and everybody will think about this, but I was quite squeamish about bringing the band back for quite a long time, and we were getting offers from um, promoters and stuff. And then I just thought, well, we're lucky that anybody actually wants to see us or hear the tunes, and that, like, why not do it and get over yourself? But I also think maybe a shift has happened. I don't know if it's just an age thing, but I think, like, I've got kids and they don't have any. They don't seem to have as much. They're not as focused on the age or the sort of chronology of the music they're listening to. It's like, if they like it, and this is something to do with streaming. I think if they
Yeah, of
like it,
course. Yeah.
no matter where it comes from. So yeah, the yeah, I feel that there's a bit more. There's less people frowning upon bringing an old band back. And actually, when you go and see live music, a lot of the time the audience is a bit older than.
Yes, well, that's it, isn't it? It's having various conversations today with various promoters and venues and things. It's where the money is, isn't it? Let's face it.
I guess that's right. Yeah,
That's it's definitely the grayer pound, if not the grey pound. But yeah,
yeah, yeah. Well, I
and I
think as
think
well, like when we were, in I don't know how old you are, but in our early 20s, say, or whatever, or late teens, or there would be more, gigs of bands who were the same sort of age or a little bit older. The different, what am I trying to say? The age group, the audience age group was generally a bit younger for live music, and
yeah,
I don't know. I
no,
think
it's true. Yeah, I mean, we sort of notice it in the dabblings we have, but I wanted to pick up on something that I saw on another interview you'd done actually, so I may as well crib that. It's like I've been stalking you across the internet. And the Wheel of Cool you mentioned, which is quite an interesting concept. And again, sort of comes on to that bands coming back, I remember sort of obviously in the 90s, Weller coming back and Elvis Costello and people like that sort of being rediscovered, a few years before Weller was sort of almost playing pubs, you know.
yeah,
And there is that sort of thing, with sort of guitar rock, maybe its place in the sun is maybe coming back again, but there is that sort of cyclical nature of things and sort of rediscovery of, like flares coming back every few years,
yeah,
comparing bands to flares, but yeah, that sort of thing.
yeah. I mean, I suppose I think when I was talking about that, I'm trying to remember. I was probably just like, rambling, but no, I think yeah, I don't know if it's other people's idea of what's cool or just what I feel um, excited about doing or inspired in, you know. And I suppose revisiting some of the themes and the sort of, yes, the world maybe that Rialto might have inhabited somehow. I don't know, something to do with changes in my life that I kind of just felt like I was in a similar place, but a bit older, you know, quite a bit older.
You don't
So,
look it.
uh,
You're
yeah,
holding up quite well. Have you got a painting in the attic somewhere or something like
no, I haven't, but no, but yeah, cheers, thanks for that.
that?
Yeah.
It's all right. So I'm quite interested by the story of how you started and got into it. There's a thing about meeting Joe Strummer and getting up
Right.
on stage at a mate's thing, but also sort of prior to that, um, sort of sitting in your house for 2 years. You sort of weren't hadn't really gone out. Sort of with feeling gloomy, and we do we do a lot with sort of mental health charities and things like that, and always have done. Obviously, all our songs are sad that we play, but I was quite interested in sort of the genesis really of your starting out and where you'd been prior to that.
Well, I think what I think I had a moment in my teens of some loss of confidence about performing, about um, yeah, I think I had a little period where I I lost the confidence, really, I guess, you know. And I think um, just trying to remember exactly what was going on, but and certainly I think as well there's something to do with that age when you spend quite a lot of time just thinking about what what you're going to do later in your life. You know, or I did. I think there was quite a lot of time in your room just thinking, you know, I know what I want to do, but I don't really know how to get there. And you know, you might, and that's maybe, you know, I was listening um, for another thing I'm doing actually. I was thinking about, you know, they asked about what music I was listening to at that point, and part of it was people singing about certain things that I wanted. You know, I thought that that's the kind of life I'd like to lead, and that's you know, Lloyd Cole sort of sounding like he had a really interesting girlfriend, even if they weren't getting on, or you know, and things like that, you know. So anyway, I think that there was a bit of a period for me that yeah, where I lost my. I just didn't know if I wanted to be getting up in front of people, and yeah, and then I did get persuaded to be involved in this band. Um, so obviously I really wanted to do, but I just nearly bottled, and then I got up. It wasn't so much a karaoke thing. It was like a collective of musicians who were a bit older, really. And we was actually playing cover versions of like country songs. But the, uh, the person that organised it, she put on the gigs in various like used to play a couple of working men's clubs and a sort of boxing club we played out. They were more of like one-off events really than a sort of regular club night. Um, and yeah, I nearly bottled. I got up on stage, gave it everything I had, and then I was on my way home. And then this voice came out of the shadows saying, "Nice singing, Lewis." My name's Louis, but the voice said Lewis. I didn't mind that at all. But and I looked up and it was Joe Strummer, and he'd been in the audience, and he'd been a, you know, bit of a hero and stuff, and it was like a sort of like a dream, you know, in a way. It sounds like, but but I just sort of I was like, yeah, nice one, man, and just sort of, and just sort of, you know, I guess it was quite an important thing for me. I just thought, well, if he thinks I can do it, then I'm going to have a go.
It's a brilliant story, though. So almost mythical Joe Strummer emerging from the shadow.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's great. I'd say, I mean, you touched briefly on your influences, but aside from that, I know because your dad put on a lot of events, so you saw a lot of the bands
Mm,
ingested it that way as well. So
yeah.
aside from that, the Clash, I think you mentioned, I've seen the Jam and Susie and the Banshees and things like that. What other sort of influences did you have when you were younger?
I suppose there were things like I heard a lot of things from my mum and dad that were things like my mum was very into like Dylan and Van Morrison and then my dad's taste veered more towards things like Al Green and so I guess there was that sort of stuff. Um, First sort of music that contemporary sort of stuff that I really got into was kind of late 70s things. Um, and that very went from Elvis Costello to all the sort of two-tone bands, um, all of that sort of stuff. I still think that's a really great period of music actually because there were a lot of different bands, from the late, just sort of post-punk to kind of mid 80s. I think there were a lot of bands that were really imaginative and had their own sound and look and everything, but seemingly without any kind of older Svengali sort of puppet master. They seem to really, um, yeah, have these. So yeah, I think that period was quite still quite influential. And I loved as a kid. I loved um, Up the Junction by Squeeze. That was a big song for me, just because. And I realise now that it was the narrative lyric that I was just I was it was just like a little movie.
Yeah, that's quite interesting actually, because that was one of the things I was going to sort of move on to, and the sort of your songs do sort of paint a canvas. They are, there is a sort of narrative you don't get it in, with some artists. The kind of um, Monday morning 519. That whole, I mean, that is a bit sort of very broad sweep of what's going through somebody's mind about that. Uh, it's kind of some similar sort of theme to Mr. Brightside. Bizarrely, I was thinking in the shower this morning, actually. But
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, obviously, yeah, sonically somewhat different, but not probably sung at wakes and weddings and various other things. But yeah, there is a sort of very artistic sort of canvas you weave with your songs.
I think it probably helped me find a way into lyric writing. Details of real things and little snatches of stories or whatever. I think that helped me. I don't find lyrics easy to write, but I think that helped me find a way in. And yeah, I did. I went to art college. I was quite. If I, my other real joy growing up, other than music, was painting and drawing, and so I suppose there's a visual side to the way I think about lyrics. So which means I might be more inclined to paint a kind of picture with the lyrics than just talk about just sort of name the emotions. For instance, I find it more. Um, and I've always loved songs. From Up the Junction to Say a Little Prayer, by Aretha Franklin. Or, it's just this detail. The moment I wake up before I put on my makeup, it's like I'm there. Um,
Yeah, you've got. I was thinking that there was a line in one of your songs. I was thinking I can't remember it. Something about yeah. While she, yeah. I blew my chances while you blow dry your hair. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I can, okay. I can see
yeah,
where that came from.
yeah. It's those, yeah. I mean, that's probably a direct line from
But
that
it is
from
paint. It is what it's painting a picture. It's quite interesting. You say you find it hard lyrically because I know I saw one quote that sort of name checked you with Paul Weller and uh, Elvis Costello. You know, which is a good company to be in. And there's the quote from Noel Gallagher saying, you know, wished he'd written, you know, what you wrote. So it,
I think, all of those people have been more prolific than me. So, I do. I mean, I find it difficult. I do find it difficult, but it doesn't mean that doesn't make me give up. But it's just if I'm writing lyrics, I find that's the toughest part of it. Um, to yeah, I find that the hardest bit, but it doesn't mean I want. I do try and make them decent. Um, Leonard Cohen's I think you know, he's up there for me. Is I'm sure along with lots of other people, but it's particularly his '80s sort of work, like "I'm Your Man." Um, Currently, I think Hamish Hawke. I think is really he's written a few tunes that I think are lyrically, I've been super impressed with and moved by. It's all very well being clever, but it's like you want something that moves you as well, as sort of kind of surprises you. Um, but yeah, yeah. Um,
they are
you know,
quite gloomy, though, aren't they? Most of your tunes. I mean, we
Gloomy.
they're often the feeling gloomy playlist, you know. Yeah.
No, aren't they? And what is that? I don't. It's a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, you've obviously thought a lot about this. What is it about gloomy stuff that somehow is life affirming or emotionally powerful and sort of, I don't know, it's sort of somehow strengthening in some way.
Yeah, it's interesting, the sort of the connection. I don't know. I mean, you know, uh, I think every artist has a gloomy tune, no matter who you look at. I mean, it's just it may sound up, but I mean that was the whole premise of Feeling Gloomy, and you know, it was it could be a very upbeat song in its tempo, but actually the lyrics, when you sort of dig down to it, you know, I mean, you know, Steps had sad songs and things like that. You know, Kylie, you know, all those sort of every artist has, but
Yeah.
it's whether or not they're perceived as you know miserable. But yeah, there is definitely a deeper connection on the sadder ones, I think.
Mm.
But you know, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to go
Yeah.
into that one.
No, it's hard to write a happy song that isn't annoying. That's for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, uh, yeah. I think I do tend towards that. Absolutely, I do in my own writing and stuff. But I try and find some, I do try and find some light in there as well. In the, I think I think what I try and write about is somehow if it's gloomy, I like to have a feeling somehow that it's consoling and at the same time. So it's not just like, oh, poor me, I've had terrible luck just recently, or this is, in love or whatever it is. I, I, yeah, I think if there's some sort of warmth, um, you can have some gloom as long as there's some warmth and some sort of consoling um, emotion, feeling comes through it as well, so that the listener can connect with it rather than just pity the person in the song. You've got to be able to feel like maybe it's, yeah, somehow it's bigger hearted than that somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of the time. I don't think we've got too long left, so I'll obviously mention the album before we go and the gig. But one thing I sort of wanted to mention was sort of how your two bands sort of got lumped, sort of the either end of what people term Britpop, which obviously is a fairly nebulous thing, like indie.
Yeah.
But you sort of were at the start and you were kind of at the end. Uh,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah,
quite interesting.
I think just that's my timing.
Yeah.
I
But
just
sonically, you were very different, from.
I think they both fit in. They both, we weren't. One was prior to it, so
Yeah.
it could have slotted into that sort of movement in a way that it didn't because whatever we came just before it really, um and then by the time we'd you know that band had split up and we'd spent some time you know kind of developing Rialto, changing from this previous band. There were two members of the previous band, that myself and Johnny Bull, and we spent some time. I was writing the songs. Johnny had a little 8 track um, and a sampler and a few instruments, and we just demoed and stuff. And so, it was just a timing thing, really. I think by the time the record was made and came out, and we had some label problems,
Yeah.
it was definitely the as Britpop was seen as a sort of as this kind of cultural movement. It was definitely towards the end of that. Um, I think what I know at the time was like I just wanted to make a record that was gonna stand up and that didn't need to be part of any movement. Or I kind of really want to, whether people think we succeeded or not. We we just wanted to make a record that people sort of couldn't deny was pretty good. Whether they liked it or not, they'd have to sort of go, well, that's
It is quite interesting, sort of. Again, you were sort of you're not the wheel of cool, but you were slightly ahead of the curve. Um,
yeah, I suppose, yeah, yeah. I can't take any credit for that really. I think it was just, you know, that was what suddenly was occurring, and we just have to be the first to do it. But yeah, yeah, um,
well, on that note, the time is ticking down on the old Zoom call.
yeah.
Excuse me. Thank you very much for being our first guest. You've
Thank
been an absolute delight. Thank you. And putting up with all my slightly weird questions. You're playing the Scala, 14th of May.
That's right.
Get your tickets. And Neon and Ghost Signs, the new album, is out the 24th or 25th of April.
25th of April. It's
25th of
out. Yeah,
April. There
and
we go.
you
Marvelous.
yeah you can if you're on Instagram, for instance, or Facebook, if that's how you like to do stuff, you can click on the link in our bio and all the different sort of options of coming to in stores, which we're doing a load of in stores. Um,
You're touring with Sleeper, is that right? Late in the year.
we're talking with Sleeper later in the year. That's September, October, but in April and May we're doing. Sorry, in May we're doing in stores like rough trade shops, some sort of more kind of stripped back versions of songs, and then we're playing at the Scala the 14th of May.
Right. That's the end of it. Thank you very much. Get your tickets, everyone. As I say, again, thanks very much. Thank you. Much appreciate that. Might see you down the Scala. I'll give you a wave.
So, cheers.